Welcome back. Today, we dive into a global phenomenon that shattered charts and completely divided the world. Love them or hate them, you absolutely cannot ignore them. How did 7 boys from a near-bankrupt agency become the undisputed kings of pop while simultaneously triggering the most intense wave of internet hate ever seen? What is the secret driving this massive obsession and fierce backlash? Is it the fans, the industry politics, or something much deeper? Get ready to unpack the ultimate truth behind the hype and the hate. This is the top 7 reasons BTS is the most hated and loved group. Number 7. Halsey. The Western gatekeeping xenophobic backlash. When 7 young men from South Korea stepped onto the American music stage, they did not just change the charts, they completely exposed the deep-seated biases of the global entertainment industry, sparking a massive wave of both unparalleled adoration and toxic hostility. American singer-songwriter Halsey, who famously collaborated with the group on their record-breaking hit single Boy With Love, has frequently spoken out about the stark double standards and blatant gatekeeping BTS faced from Western media and critics, who simply could not handle their meteoric rise. To the established Western music elite and casual listeners entrenched in Eurocentric pop culture, BTS was seen as an invading force that threatened the status quo, leading to an immediate defense mechanism wrapped in xenophobia, racism, and dismissive mockery. Critics and haters quickly weaponized the language barrier, mockingly asking why anyone would listen to music they could not understand, completely ignoring the fact that English-speaking audiences have consumed non-English music for decades whenever it suited them. This cultural barrier became the ultimate breeding ground for intense hatred, as radio programmers across the United States and Europe routinely boycotted their music, refusing to give them airplay despite millions of fan requests, openly admitting that they did not want to play songs sung in Korean. Halsey pointed out how heartbreaking it was to witness the industry treat these incredibly hard-working artists as a mere novelty or a passing internet trend, rather than acknowledging their legitimate musicality, songwriting depth, and jaw-dropping performance skills. The hate did not stop at radio boycotts. It trickled down into mainstream television, where Western hosts frequently made casual, deeply offensive jokes about the boys' appearances, their synchronized dancing, and even compared them to global health crises like the coronavirus, reflecting a disgusting level of normalized anti-Asian racism. Haters flooded social media platforms with toxic narratives, claiming that BTS was nothing more than a manufactured corporate product designed to brainwash young girls, completely disregarding the years of blood, sweat, and tears the members spent fighting from the absolute bottom of a bankrupt agency just to be heard. Yet it was precisely this vicious gatekeeping that ignited an unstoppable counterfire of fierce love and loyalty from their global fandom, known as ARMY, who decided that if the traditional industry would not give BTS a seat at the table, they would build an entirely new table themselves. Millions of fans worldwide united to systematically dismantle these barriers, launching massive streaming campaigns, buying physical albums in unprecedented numbers, and literally forcing the Western mainstream media to acknowledge a group they desperately wanted to ignore. Halsey herself expressed profound admiration for how BTS handled this intense pressure, noting that despite being subjected to microaggressions on live television and being used by Western award shows purely for social media engagement and television ratings, while being continuously snubbed in major categories, the members never lost their humility, grace, or artistic integrity. This duality of being fiercely hated by the traditional gatekeepers while being fiercely protected and loved by a global community created a cultural war zone around the group, making their every achievement a political statement against Western hegemony in pop music. The sheer irony remains that the very hatred meant to suppress them only served to solidify their legendary status, turning their journey into a monumental narrative of resilience that proved music transcends language and borders, leaving the haters left behind in the dust of history while BTS marched on to conquer the world. Every single stadium they sold out across America and Europe was a direct, deafening answer to the critics who said they did not belong, transforming the venom of xenophobia into the ultimate fuel for a global revolution that forever altered the landscape of modern entertainment. Number 6. Chris Martin. The Factory Robot Myth, a Misunderstood Artistry, Breaking the Mold. When the world first locked its eyes on BTS, a massive chunk of the general public and staunch music purists instantly dismissed them as nothing more than a heavily manufactured product of the notorious K-pop idol factory system, sparking an aggressive wave of condescension and completely unwarranted hate. People looked at their perfectly synchronized choreography, their flawlessly styled hair, and their polished visuals, and immediately concluded that these 7 boys were simply corporate puppets dancing to the tunes of greedy executives devoid of any real artistic soul or creative autonomy. This deeply ingrained prejudice, often fueled by an inherent bias against the highly structured Asian entertainment industry, became a massive club used by haters to beat down every single achievement the group managed to secure. Critics scoffed at their massive success, claiming it was entirely artificial, while underground hip-hop purists, even in their own home country, mocked RM and Suga for allegedly selling out, viciously attacking them during their early days for daring to call themselves authentic rappers while wearing makeup and performing pop routines on weekly music shows. The hatred was suffocating and relentless, as they were constantly told by industry veterans that they were not real musicians, just pretty faces manufactured for mindless teenage consumption. But the undeniable truth, the massive secret weapon that turned millions of skeptics into die-hard lovers, was their profound, raw, and bleeding authenticity, a rare quality that legendary Coldplay frontman Chris Martin instantly recognized and fiercely defended when he collaborated with them on the smash hit My Universe. Chris Martin openly defied the haters and the Western industry snobs by traveling all the way to South Korea during the absolute height of a terrifying global pandemic, navigating strict quarantine rules and logistical nightmares, just because he absolutely had to work with them face-to-face in their own studio. He publicly stated that he saw a genuine, profound musicality and a deeply rebellious spirit in how they operated, emphasizing that any narrative painting them as mere industry plants was entirely false. He was completely mesmerized by their active participation in the songwriting, composing, and production process, a stark contrast to the factory narrative forced upon them by ignorant media outlets. Fans, of course, knew the real truth from the very beginning. RM, Suga, and J-Hope had incredibly deep roots in the underground rap and dance scenes, and they, along with the incredibly talented vocal line of Jin, Jimin, V, and Jungkook, poured their darkest anxieties, their fears of inevitable failure, and their intimate struggles with mental health into self-produced tracks that broke every single taboo in conservative South Korean society. Songs like Black Swan, which tackles the terrifying death of an artist's passion, Spring Day, a gorgeous yet heartbreaking tribute to loss and tragic grief, and their entire Love Yourself era were not handed to them on a silver platter by old executives in sterile boardroom meetings. These masterpieces were birthed directly from the members' own blood, sweat, and tears in tiny, cramped studios, addressing generational trauma, systemic societal pressures, the crushing weight of academic expectations, and the brutal reality of youth in a way that resonated on a deeply visceral level with millions across the globe. Chris Martin publicly praised their unique ability to sing about such profound existential topics while maintaining an infectious, stadium-shaking energy, proving once and for all that you can absolutely be a highly polished performer and a legitimate, deeply thoughtful artist at the exact same time. The striking juxtaposition of their flawless stage execution and their emotionally naked lyricism completely shattered the limiting box that the world tried to desperately shove them into. It is a spectacular irony that the very thing haters aggressively used to invalidate them, their origin in the rigorous K-pop training system, became the exact platform they used to completely revolutionize the definition of what a modern boy band can be in the 21st century. They took the rigorous training, the intense physical discipline, and the polished aesthetics of their industry and completely weaponized it, using it as a brilliant Trojan horse to deliver subversive, healing, and deeply personal messages to an international audience that was utterly desperate for genuine connection. When haters screamed that they were fake and robotic, fans simply pointed to the endless hours of raw behind-the-scenes documentary footage, the tearful late-night live streams where members openly cried about their insecurities, and the fiercely independent mixtape releases where members like Suga as August D laid their souls completely bare, discussing social phobia and depression without any censorship. The global love for BTS grew exponentially precisely because people felt they were watching genuine underdogs who were fighting a rigged, elitist system from the inside out, proving day after day that true artistry cannot be manufactured in a boardroom. It can only be cultivated through genuine passion, agonizing vulnerability, and relentless hard work. Chris Martin's vocal admiration and genuine friendship with the group served as a massive, echoing slap in the face to Western gatekeepers, powerfully validating what ARMY had known for years. BTS are not products. They are trailblazing pioneers. They are absolute masters of their craft who meticulously write, compose, and produce the emotional soundtrack of an entire generation, literally turning the vitriol of their harshest critics into the very stepping stones that led them straight to undisputed global domination. Every time a skeptic tried to tear them down by citing their synchronization as proof of lacking individuality, members like Jeon and V would deliver incredibly distinct, soul-stirring solo performances that highlighted their unique vocal colors and emotional ranges, while Jeon and Jungkook consistently anchored the group's massive sound with unparalleled stability and raw power. The relentless accusations of being plastic, inauthentic pawns were completely dismantled the moment people realized these artists were utilizing their massive global platform to speak at the United Nations, addressing the critical importance of youth empowerment and self-love, a feat that no mere manufactured group could ever authentically pull off. They defied gravity, defied expectations, and completely redefined the global music hierarchy, proving that the loudest hate is often just disguised fear of an unstoppable revolutionary change. This incredible, earth-shattering clash between the persistent, ignorant myth of the manufactured idol and the beautiful and undeniable reality of their artistic depth is exactly why the emotional polarization surrounding them is so unbelievably intense today, creating an unbreakable bond of fierce loyalty from those who finally took the time to read the lyrics translations and understand the profound, life-saving message behind the music. Are you ready to discover the next explosive reason that pushed the world into an absolute frenzy? What happens when breaking records threatens the very foundation of the music industry? Number 5. Ed Sheeran, the chart manipulation accusations, a fandom army, crushing the old guard. When the history books of the modern global music industry are finally written, there will undoubtedly be a massive, highly controversial chapter dedicated solely to the absolute sheer panic and unprecedented disruption that BTS inflicted upon the traditional Western charting system, a phenomenon that triggered one of the most vicious defensive backlashes ever witnessed in pop culture history. For decades, the coveted Billboard 100 and other major Western music charts were tightly controlled by a very predictable, deeply entrenched system, heavily reliant on radio airplay, industry connections, and strategic playlisting curated by a select few powerful executives, making it nearly impossible for an outsider, let alone a non-English-speaking Asian group, to even crack the top 10. However, when RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, Jimin, V, and Jungkook began their unstoppable ascent, backed by the terrifyingly organized and fiercely dedicated global powerhouse known as ARMY, they did not just climb the charts, they completely bulldozed the established hierarchy, bypassing the radio monopoly entirely through sheer unprecedented organic fan power, digital sales, and monumental streaming numbers. This abrupt shift in power terrified the established music elite, immediately giving birth to a toxic narrative that heavily fueled the hatred against the group. The deeply insulting, endlessly repeated accusation of chart manipulation, and the widespread belief that their astronomical success was nothing more than the work of mindless bots and fraudulent mass buying tactics. Western critics, rival fandoms, and deeply threatened industry insiders openly sneered at their historic achievements, maliciously framing the millions of passionate fans buying digital tracks as an illegitimate, cheating loophole, completely ignoring the blatant hypocrisy that Western artists had been successfully utilizing ridiculous merchandise bundles, ticket sales attachments, and massive payola campaigns for years to artificially inflate their own numbers without facing even a fraction of the same scrutiny. The hatred reached such an astronomical, systemic level that Billboard literally changed its long-standing charting rules multiple times, specifically eliminating the counting of multiple digital purchases and heavily nerfing the weight of direct sales, in what was widely perceived by the public and media analysts as a direct, targeted attack designed specifically to strip BTS of their charting power and protect Western artists who could rely on comfortable, guaranteed radio spins. Yet, in the face of this overwhelming, institutionalized hostility, global pop superstar Ed Sheeran stepped forward as a powerful voice of validation, completely shattering the hateful narrative by openly praising the group's undeniable talent, their insane work ethic, and the absolute legitimacy of their massive global impact. Ed Sheeran, a man who has practically lived at the very pinnacle of the global charts himself and intimately understands the mechanics of musical success, chose to deeply embrace their artistry rather than fear it, eagerly collaborating with them to co-write the beautifully emotional track Make It Right from their Map of the Soul Persona album, and later penning the joyously uplifting pandemic-era smash hit Permission to Dance. Sheeran publicly and repeatedly referred to BTS as the biggest band in the world, completely dismissing the bitter critics and emphasizing that their success was driven by a level of genuine musicality and an authentic, emotional connection with their fans that simply cannot be faked or manufactured by algorithms. He recognized that while haters desperately tried to invalidate the group by pointing fingers at the fierce dedication of ARMY, that exact dedication was actually the ultimate proof of their profound, world-changing impact, because you simply cannot force millions of real human beings across different continents, cultures, and time zones to spend their hard-earned money and dedicate their precious time unless the music resonates with them on an incredibly deep, soul-stirring, and life-saving level. The extreme polarization surrounding their chart dominance became a beautiful, poetic battleground. On one side, you had furious gatekeepers desperately trying to change the rules of the game to protect their fragile Eurocentric monopoly. And on the other side, you had 7 humble boys from South Korea who continuously responded to the immense vitriol, not with anger, but even better music, breathtaking performances, and an unbreakable bond with their fans. When asked about the malicious allegations of chart manipulation during high-profile interviews, the group's brilliant leader, RM, delivered a legendary, profoundly classy response, stating that if Billboard felt the need to change the rules, it was entirely their right, but it was incredibly unfair to make BTS the easy target of their frustration, simply because their fans are uniquely loyal. This intense friction, this relentless tug-of-war between the panicked, hateful desperation of an outdated industry and the boundless, protective love of a global fandom only served to cement BTS's legacy as a revolutionary underdogs who exposed the rigged nature of the game and won anyway, achieving historic milestones like sending the entirely Korean-language track Life Goes On straight to the #1 spot on the Hot 100, proving once and for all that music is a universal language that absolutely refuses to be silenced by xenophobic bureaucracy. The more the industry tried to lock them out by changing the locks, the more Ed Sheeran and millions of fans worldwide joined forces to simply tear the entire door down, transforming the hateful accusations into a glorious testament of their undisputed reign. This fierce clash of industry titans and passionate fans sets the stage for an even darker, more personal struggle that almost tore the group apart from the inside. What happens when the weight of the crown becomes too heavy and the greatest threat to their survival is not the haters, but their own burning exhaustion? Number 4. John Cena. The crushing weight of the crown. A vulnerable confession, the brink of disbandment. Behind the dazzling, blinding stadium lights, the unprecedented record-breaking achievements, and the deafening, earth-shattering screams of millions of adoring fans lies a deeply painful, agonizingly human reality that completely shatters the glossy illusion of the perfect pop star life, revealing a level of suffocating pressure that very nearly destroyed the greatest musical act in the world from the inside out. In the monumental year of 2018, BTS was experiencing a meteoric, unstoppable rise that most artists can only hallucinate about in their wildest dreams. They were ruthlessly conquering the Billboard charts, delivering a historic, profoundly moving speech at the United Nations General Assembly, and selling out massive, sprawling arenas across the entire globe. But the incredibly toxic, venomous byproduct of this unimaginable, unparalleled success was an absolutely crushing, unbearable mental and physical exhaustion that threatened to swallow them whole. The sheer, unadulterated hatred they faced daily, ranging from malicious, highly coordinated cyberbullying campaigns and xenophobic media attacks to terrifying, highly credible death threats specifically directed at members like Jeon and RM, combined with the incredibly suffocating, almost divine expectations to be flawless ambassadors of their nation and culture, created a toxic, inescapable pressure cooker that pushed all 7 members to their absolute breaking point. We are talking about a level of physical exertion that literally saw members collapsing backstage, gasping for air through emergency oxygen masks just seconds after delivering flawless high-energy performances, only to sprint back out into the blinding lights with bright smiles, as if their lungs were not completely burning. It was a terrifying, mind-bending paradox. They were receiving an overwhelming, life-changing ocean of love from ARMY, yet simultaneously drowning in an unprecedented tsunami of global scrutiny, hateful media narratives, and the relentless, blood-sucking demands of an entertainment industry that never, ever sleeps. The haters, critics, and rival fandoms gleefully waited for them to slip up in the shadows, meticulously and obsessively analyzing their every single breath, facial expression, and spoken word, absolutely desperate for a manufactured scandal that could finally tear them down from their towering, untouchable pedestal. This relentless psychological warfare forced the boys into a terrifyingly dark, isolated corner, leading to a heartbreaking, tear-filled, emotionally naked confession at the 2018 Mnet Asian Music Awards that sent absolute paralyzing shockwaves across the entire globe and completely stopped the music industry in its tracks. As they stood trembling on the massive stage in Hong Kong to accept the highly coveted, prestigious Artist of the Year award, the group's eldest member, Jeon, grabbed the microphone with shaking hands and bravely confessed to millions of viewers watching live that earlier that very year, the extreme mental toll and crushing psychological burden had become so agonizingly severe that they sat down together in a small room and genuinely, seriously discussed disbanding the group forever. The world stopped spinning for a fractured moment. Millions of fans wept uncontrollably in front of their screens, and even the most hardened, cynical industry critics were forced to pause and intimately witness the raw, bleeding humanity of these young men who were quite literally suffocating under the unimaginable, Atlas-like weight of their own magnificent crown. It was in this incredibly vulnerable, emotionally raw space that global superstar, legendary professional wrestler and Hollywood actor John Cena emerged not just as a casual celebrity fan, but as a fierce, deeply articulate and highly vocal defender of their profound emotional resilience and philosophical depth. John Cena, a massive global icon who has intimately experienced the highest highs of worldwide fame and the brutal, unforgiving nature of intense public scrutiny, was deeply moved by their willingness to be so radically transparent about their mental health struggles in a notoriously cutthroat industry that historically punishes and blacklists any sign of perceived weakness. He publicly praised BTS across numerous major American television interviews, specifically highlighting how their groundbreaking, monumental Love Yourself era was absolutely not just a clever, superficial marketing gimmick or a catchy, highly produced slogan for their fans to buy merchandise, but rather a desperate, highly personal, and deeply intimate survival anthem for the members themselves as they violently navigated the darkest, most terrifying period of their entire careers. Cena marvelously and passionately articulated that what truly makes BTS a revolutionary once-in-a-lifetime phenomenon, what genuinely elevates them from mere pop stars to genuine era-defining cultural icons, is their unparalleled, almost superhuman ability to take their deepest, most agonizing pains, their crippling, paralyzing anxieties, and their near-fatal, soul-crushing burnout and brilliantly transform it into universally healing, deeply transformative art. He passionately defended them against the vicious, heartless internet trolls and xenophobic commentators who callously mocked their on-stage tears, firmly stating that true strength, real, unadulterated masculinity and power is not about maintaining a stoic, emotionless, robotic facade, but about having the extraordinary, unparalleled courage to stand before the entire judging world, openly admit that you are completely broken and choose to lock arms and keep fighting anyway. This earth-shattering moment of pure honesty fundamentally and permanently shifted the dynamic between the group, their fandom, and the general public. For the millions of fans who fiercely loved them, the agonizing Mama 2018 speech forged an unbreakable, blood oath level of loyalty. They were no longer just passively supporting a highly talented musical act. They were fiercely, aggressively protecting 7 young men who had literally sacrificed their youth, their freedom, and their mental well-being to bring unparalleled comfort and joy to the world. Conversely, for the cynical, bitter haters who desperately tried to paint them as unfeeling, corporate-manufactured K-pop robots, devoid of artistic soul, this profound display of genuine, heartbreaking vulnerability completely destroyed their toxic narrative, brutally exposing the critics as callous, heartless bullies who were actively trying to destroy the lives of deeply sensitive, profoundly gifted artists. V cried uncontrollably, hiding his face in his hands. J-Hope covered his face in sheer disbelief. Suga fought back heavy tears, and Jungkook openly wept as they bared their naked souls on that stage, proving to everyone watching that the ultimate price of global domination is very often paid in invisible, agonizing lifelong scars. The fact that RM, Jeon, Suga, J-Hope, Jimin, V, and Jungkook actively chose to stay together, that they consciously chose to renew their restrictive contracts, and that they deliberately chose to channel that immense, suffocating pain into even more extraordinary music, like the visceral, anger-fueled hip-hop track Tear, which was literally written by Suga during this exact period about the heartbreaking prospect of their disbandment, is a testament to a level of brotherhood that absolutely defies logical comprehension. John Cena's highly public, deeply respectful admiration served as a massive, undeniably bright spotlight, beautifully illuminating the fact that the greatest, most profound reason BTS is so incredibly loved worldwide is precisely because they are so profoundly, unapologetically human. They bleed, they break, they cry, and yet they continuously, miraculously rise from their own ashes, firmly holding the hands of their fans and walking forward together into the terrifying unknown. The intense, fiery, blinding hatred they face from jealous onlookers and threatened gatekeepers is ultimately powerless, hollow, and utterly pathetic against a group that has already conquered their own darkest inner demons, looked the terrifying abyss of total disbandment right in the eye, and emerged significantly stronger, more incredibly united, and more devastatingly unstoppable than ever before in music history. Number 3. Charlie Puth. The dark shadow of obsession, a terrifying devotion, the price of absolute fame. When you achieve a level of global supremacy that rivals the historical heights of the Beatles, the blinding light of that unparalleled success casts an equally massive, deeply terrifying, and pitch-black shadow, giving birth to a chilling phenomenon that completely blurs the extremely fragile line between passionate adoration and dangerous psychological obsession. While millions of genuine armies around the world continuously utilize their massive collective power for incredible acts of global philanthropy, organizing monumental charity drives, funding entire schools, planting massive forests, and fiercely protecting the group from malicious industry gatekeepers, there exists a severely twisted, horrifyingly toxic underbelly to this unparalleled fame that actively fuels the intense public hatred and severe skepticism directed toward the group from the outside world. We are talking about the horrifying, deeply disturbing reality of sasaengs, terrifying, highly organized stalkers who completely disguise their severe mental obsessions as fan devotion, creating an absolute, inescapable living nightmare for RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, Jimin, V, and Jungkook on a daily, suffocating basis. This extreme, invasive fanaticism is frequently and unfairly weaponized by haters, critics, and the general public who lazily brand the entire massive fandom as completely unhinged and deeply toxic, maliciously using the terrifying criminal actions of a delusional minority to aggressively justify their deep-seated, irrational hatred for the group itself. But the people who suffer the absolute most from this terrifying, inescapable reality are the 7 members themselves, who have been forcibly shoved into a state of constant, paralyzing hypervigilance, completely stripped of their basic, fundamental human rights to personal privacy and physical safety. Imagine the absolute psychological terror of boarding a completely private, highly secure first-class flight, desperately hoping to finally escape the suffocating pressures of the demanding world, only to discover that obsessive, deeply disturbed stalkers have illegally purchased highly confidential flight manifests, actively bribed corrupt airline employees, and systematically booked the exact seats right next to, directly in front of, and immediately behind you, just to silently, creepily watch you sleep for 14 straight hours. V has heartbreakingly and very publicly spoken out about this exact terrifying violation of basic human decency, expressing the profound fear, intense discomfort, and deep anxiety the members feel when they are literally trapped in the sky inside a metal tube, unable to escape the penetrating, predatory gazes of individuals who clearly view them not as living, breathing human beings, but as completely possessed objects of their own sick, deeply twisted fantasies. The invasion of their personal privacy regularly reaches levels of absolute jaw-dropping insanity. Deeply personal, supposedly secure, and unreleased phone numbers are routinely and illegally sold on the international black market for thousands of dollars, leading to the terrifying modern phenomenon where members like Jungkook are repeatedly aggressively called by completely unknown stalkers right in the middle of incredibly intimate, vulnerable late-night live streams with their genuine fans, forcing the golden mockmate to openly, visibly frustrated, beg these intrusive individuals to stop harassing him. Furthermore, Jungkook has been forced to publicly and directly address horrifying situations where unknown, severely delusional individuals illegally discovered his highly classified private home address and began sending massive, unsolicited food deliveries straight to his front door, an incredibly chilling, massive security breach that deeply highlighted the horrifying, terrifying vulnerability of being the most famous men on the entire planet. American pop superstar Charlie Puth, who has intimately collaborated with Jungkook on the massive global smash hit Left and Right and has personally shared the highly energized stage with the group at international award shows, has spoken candidly about the deeply overwhelming, incredibly complex, and sometimes downright terrifying nature of internet culture and hyper-fame, specifically highlighting the intense, highly volatile spotlight that continuously follows BTS wherever they go. Charlie Puth, who himself faced an aggressive, highly confusing, and deeply toxic wave of internet scrutiny and bizarre rumors simply for collaborating and associating with the group, openly expressed his absolute, genuine astonishment at the group's profound mental fortitude, noting that the incredibly intense internet environment surrounding them is so highly charged and heavily scrutinized that it literally feels like walking barefoot through a terrifying, highly explosive minefield every single day. He intimately understands the terrifying double-edged sword of modern digital-era pop stardom, where the absolute, overwhelming adoration of millions is heavily and dangerously intertwined with the constant, terrifying threat of internet toxicity, severe privacy invasions, and constant misinterpretation, and he has publicly praised the group's undeniable musical genius and incredible grace while navigating an incredibly turbulent environment that would instantly crush the sanity and spirit of almost anyone else in the industry. The horrifying, heartbreaking reality is that these 7 young men cannot even enjoy a simple, quiet dinner at a local restaurant, walk down a regular street to enjoy the night air, or quietly visit a local art museum without the constant, suffocating, paralyzing fear of strategically hidden cameras, unauthorized, illegal tracking devices literally placed on their private vehicles, and massive, completely dangerous mobs violently crushing them at airport terminals. These international airports frequently transform into incredibly dangerous, chaotic war zones, where Jimin and J-Hope have literally been aggressively pushed, violently shoved, and repeatedly tripped by chaotic, completely out of control, screaming crowds who violently trample over each other, knocking over security barricades, just to snap a blurry, highly intrusive photograph for social media clout. It is a deeply agonizing, profoundly heartbreaking paradox of global fame. They are universally loved and practically worshipped by millions of people who genuinely, earnestly credit their profound, healing music for saving their lives from the darkest depths of depression and despair. Yet they are simultaneously, relentlessly hunted by a deeply disturbed faction that aggressively steals their own lives away, drop by an agonizing drop. RM, the group's profoundly philosophical, deeply introspective, and brilliantly articulate leader, has famously and incredibly poetically stated that where there is a massive light, there must also inevitably be a massive shadow, and as their global light has grown to an unbelievably blinding, historically unprecedented intensity, their shadow has tragically evolved into a terrifying, towering monster that constantly threatens to consume them whole. The haters, completely devoid of empathy, maliciously point to this terrifying, chaotic atmosphere and aggressively use it to mock the group, cruelly calling their highly restricted lives a pathetic, manufactured golden prison, deliberately and maliciously ignoring the undisputed fact that BTS are the actual bleeding victims of this terrifying systemic dynamic, desperately trying to maintain their fragile sanity, their fiercely independent artistic integrity, and their profound, genuine love for their true fans, while constantly fighting a terrifying, invisible, completely unacknowledged war against aggressive stalking and severe privacy violations. Jin has repeatedly, earnestly, and emotionally pleaded for basic human decency on social media platforms, while Suga has masterfully poured this deeply dark, absolutely suffocating reality directly into his raw, incredibly aggressive solo hip-hop music, brutally and fearlessly calling out the obsessive stalkers, the invasive paparazzi, and the malicious media who gleefully and greedily profit from their immense personal suffering, proving once again that their absolute greatest defense mechanism and coping strategy is their unflinching, brutally honest artistry. This terrifying, incredibly suffocating atmosphere of extreme, absolutely life-threatening fame perfectly illustrates why the emotional, global polarization surrounding them is so unbelievably intense. To genuinely love BTS is to constantly, anxiously fear for their basic physical safety and mental well-being, and to aggressively hate them is to blindly and cruelly participate in the aggressive, systematic dehumanization of 7 remarkable young men who have heavily sacrificed their entire youth, their profound personal freedom, and their incredibly fragile peace of mind to become the ultimate, undeniable emotional sanctuary for an entire, deeply hurting generation. But what happens when this intense, blinding spotlight dramatically shifts away from their personal struggles and directly illuminates a terrifying, highly controversial political battlefield that could literally rewrite the laws of their entire country?
Number 2. Pharrell Williams, The Great Military Divide, A Nation Torn Apart, The Ultimate Patriotic Sacrifice. For years, a massive, incredibly dark and heavily ominous storm cloud hovered directly over the brilliant, unprecedented global success of BTS, a terrifying, highly controversial, and profoundly polarizing political issue that completely transcended the typical realm of pop culture and literally tore the entire nation of South Korea in half, creating a vicious battlefield of intense public hatred and fierce, unwavering defense. In South Korea, mandatory military conscription is not just a simple government policy, it is a deeply ingrained, fiercely protected, and highly sensitive societal pillar, a rigorous rite of passage required of all able-bodied young men to defend their country against the constant looming threat of their northern neighbors, and historically, any celebrity perceived as attempting to evade or delay this sacred duty faces absolute career-destroying public annihilation. As BTS miraculously ascended to the highest pinnacle of global supremacy, single-handedly injecting billions of dollars into the South Korean economy, completely revitalizing the nation's tourism industry, and elevating the country's cultural soft power to astonishing, unprecedented heights, a massive, incredibly fierce national debate erupted over whether these 7 extraordinary young men deserved a special military exemption, a privilege traditionally reserved strictly for elite Olympic athletes and classical musicians who bring immense global prestige to the nation. This very debate instantly became the ultimate, highly destructive weapon for haters, rival fandoms, and bitter critics who maliciously and aggressively accused the group of being deeply entitled, selfish, and cowardly, viciously framing them as pampered celebrities who believed they were somehow above the law and exempt from the heavy, blood-soaked sacrifices made by ordinary Korean citizens. The absolute tragedy of this agonizing years-long saga was that RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, Jimin, V, and Jungkook never once actually asked for an exemption. They had repeatedly, earnestly, and publicly stated for years that they would proudly and willingly serve their country when the time came, but they were viciously dragged into the center of a chaotic, highly toxic political circus by opportunistic, completely self-serving politicians who desperately wanted to milk the group's astronomical global fame for their own political clout and public approval ratings. The government endlessly debated the BTS law, dangling the highly lucrative possibility of exemption in front of the media, completely paralyzing the group's ability to plan their own futures and subjecting them to a relentless, agonizing daily barrage of severe public scrutiny, aggressive media think pieces, and hateful internet comments from angry men who had already served and deeply resented the mere idea of a pop group receiving special treatment. It was an incredibly dark, suffocating period where the boys were heavily criticized and violently attacked from absolutely all sides, completely trapped in a maddening, inescapable damned if you do, damned if you don't paradigm, where remaining silent was aggressively branded as cowardly evasion and speaking out was instantly twisted into arrogant entitlement. During this incredibly fragile, heavily emotionally charged transitional period, legendary American producer, fashion icon, and globally revered musical visionary Pharrell Williams stepped directly into the massive cultural conversation, sitting down for a profoundly intimate, highly publicized, and deeply philosophical Rolling Stone interview with the group's brilliant leader, RM. Pharrell, a man who has completely defined international pop and hip-hop for decades and intimately understands the crushing, highly complex weight of absolute industry dominance, looked at RM with profound, genuine respect and openly acknowledged the incredibly massive, completely terrifying burden of having to forcibly hit the pause button on the biggest, most lucrative musical career on the entire planet, simply to fulfill a mandatory national duty. Pharrell was deeply, intensely moved by RM's profound humility, his highly introspective vulnerability, and the incredible, almost superhuman grace with which the group was handling a situation that would completely shatter the mental fortitude of any Western artist, famously telling RM that what BTS was doing was incredibly noble, culturally monumental, and deeply inspiring, even offering to personally write and produce music for them to eagerly await their highly anticipated return from the military.
Pharrell's massive public validation served as a powerful, deeply resonant international reality check, beautifully highlighting to the entire world that while domestic haters were aggressively trying to tear BTS down and aggressively brand them as unpatriotic villains, the most respected, highly decorated musical legends on the planet viewed their impending, massive sacrifice as the ultimate, undeniable proof of their genuine, deeply authentic character. The sheer, overwhelming hatred and toxic political noise finally reached an absolute earth-shattering crescendo in late 2022, and precisely at the very moment when the media speculation was at its absolute ugliest and most intensely suffocating, BTS delivered the ultimate, completely devastating mic drop that instantly silenced every single hater, critic, and opportunistic politician in the country. Big Hit Music suddenly and proudly announced that the members would not wait for the government's agonizingly delayed decision, aggressively withdrawing their legal delay requests and declaring that Jin, followed sequentially by J-Hope, Suga, RM, Jimin, V, and Jungkook, would officially, proudly, and fully enlist in the South Korean military. This massive, incredibly courageous decision was an absolute, undisputed masterstroke of unparalleled integrity, completely ripping the narrative directly out of the greedy hands of the politicians and deeply proving to the entire watching world that they were, and always have been, men of their absolute word. The very haters who had spent years aggressively weaponizing the military debate against them were left completely stunned, utterly speechless, and completely devoid of any ammunition, while the global army, though deeply, profoundly heartbroken at the terrifying prospect of a years-long hiatus, swelled with an overwhelming, incredibly fierce pride that permanently solidified their absolute, unbreakable loyalty to the group. The incredibly vivid, deeply emotional images of the members lovingly shaving their heads, tightly hugging each other in freezing, snowy military training camps, and saluting in their sharp, incredibly crisp uniforms completely shattered the highly manufactured, deeply toxic myth of the pampered pop star, transforming their mandatory service into a beautiful, undeniable testament to their profound brotherhood and deep, unwavering love for their cultural roots. The intense polarization surrounding this monumental event completely defined their legacy. The haters aggressively tried to use the absolute highest, most honorable duty of a nation to violently destroy them, but the group masterfully, brilliantly turned that exact same heavy burden into the ultimate, unassailable armor, perfectly proving Pharrell Williams absolutely right in his deep philosophical assessment of their unparalleled cultural weight. By willingly walking away from billions of dollars, highly lucrative stadium tours, and the absolute peak of the global music industry to sleep in freezing barracks and perform rigorous physical labor, BTS completely destroyed the last remaining pillar of hate used against them, forever etching their names not just as the greatest pop group in history, but as genuine, deeply honorable national heroes who fearlessly paid the ultimate price for their unparalleled success. But now, as we reach the absolute summit of this massive emotional journey, we must uncover the single most powerful and undeniable core that fuels this entire global phenomenon, the very heartbeat that triggers the absolute deepest love and the most terrified defensive hate the world has ever seen. What happens when a fandom transcends simple music appreciation and literally evolves into a massive, unstoppable, fiercely protective global family that absolutely refuses to let their boys walk alone? Number 1. Elton John, The Indestructible Army, a global revolution, the ultimate symbiosis. When we finally reach the absolute, undisputed pinnacle of this incredible, emotionally exhausting, and historically unprecedented journey, we are forced to confront the single most powerful, incredibly terrifying, and deeply beautiful force in the modern entertainment world, the ultimate, undeniable reason why BTS commands the deepest, most fiercely protective love and the most violently defensive hatred on the entire planet. The global powerhouse, the absolutely indestructible, fiercely loyal phenomenon known simply as ARMY. For decades, the traditional Western music industry operated under the incredibly arrogant, heavily guarded assumption that a fan club was simply a demographic to be milked for profit, a passive, easily manipulated group of consumers who would mindlessly buy whatever heavily manufactured product was shoved down their throats. However, when BTS debuted and slowly began to conquer the globe, they completely and violently shattered this outdated, deeply insulting paradigm, cultivating a fiercely intelligent, highly organized, and unbelievably powerful symbiotic relationship with their fans that completely transcends the shallow, superficial boundaries of traditional pop music. This incredibly deep, intensely emotional bond is precisely what triggers the absolute mind-numbing hatred from jealous rival fandoms, bitter music critics, and terrified industry gatekeepers who look at the sheer, completely uncontrollable, earth-shattering power of ARMY and feel a profound, paralyzing sense of fear. Haters maliciously and aggressively attempt to brand the fandom as a mindless, toxic, and highly dangerous cult, deliberately ignoring the profound, undeniably beautiful reality that this massive global community is heavily comprised of highly educated professionals, passionate activists, brilliant academics, and incredibly diverse individuals of all ages, genders, and nationalities who have simply found genuine life-saving solace in the group's deeply philosophical and universally healing music. This immense, unprecedented cultural power caught the direct, highly respectful attention of absolute music royalty, the legendary British pop and rock icon Sir Elton John, who publicly and enthusiastically embraced the group, eagerly passing the generational torch to these 7 young men from South Korea. When BTS directly referenced Elton John in their massive pandemic-era smash hit Permission to Dance, the legendary artist did not respond with the typical arrogant gatekeeping that older Western musicians often display towards modern pop acts. Instead, he enthusiastically took to social media, publicly singing their lyrics, openly praising their incredible artistry, and passionately validating their massive global impact. Elton John intimately knows exactly what it looks like when a musical act completely takes over the entire world, having personally lived through the absolute highest peaks of Beatlemania and global superstardom, and his profound, highly vocal respect for BTS served as the ultimate, undeniable validation that their music and the massive, highly mobilized fandom behind it was absolutely not a passing, frivolous internet trend, but a monumental, era-defining cultural revolution. The sheer, terrifying power of ARMY was brilliantly and undeniably showcased to the entire world in 2020 during the height of global civil rights protests, when BTS quietly and humbly donated $1 million to the Black Lives Matter movement. Within a mere 24 hours, the global ARMY completely mobilized their massive, highly organized networks and spectacularly matched that exact $1 million donation, sending absolute shockwaves of sheer terror and profound awe through the halls of every single political and corporate institution on the planet. The haters and critics were left completely speechless, utterly humiliated, and violently stripped of their favorite lazy narrative that K-pop fans were just silly, screaming teenage girls. They were suddenly forced to reckon with a highly disciplined, completely independent global superpower that could literally sway massive economic markets, hijack racist internet hashtags, and mobilize millions of dollars for global charity at a moment's notice. This incredibly terrifying, highly disruptive level of collective power is exactly why the hatred towards BTS is so unbelievably vicious and systematic. To the established, deeply entrenched global elite, BTS is no longer just a boy band. They are the highly influential, fiercely protected leaders of a massive, uncontrollable global movement that absolutely refuses to play by the rigged rules of the traditional game. The boys themselves, RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, Jimin, V, and Jungkook, have repeatedly, tearfully, and profoundly acknowledged that they literally owe their very lives, their sanity, and their historical legacy entirely to ARMY, famously stating that they are not just standing on a stage singing to a crowd, but rather they are holding up a massive, beautiful mirror to the millions of fans who project their own desperate hopes, agonizing fears, and beautiful dreams onto the group. They are the modern-day revolutionaries who armed themselves not with weapons, but with breathtaking choreography, profoundly healing lyrics, and an absolute, unshakable belief in the power of youth. The dynamic is so incredibly intense because it is built on a foundation of mutual bleeding sacrifice. The members have sacrificed their privacy, their youth, and their mental peace, while ARMY has sacrificed their time, their resources, and their relentless energy to ensure the world remembers their names. This fierce, undeniably beautiful symbiosis completely terrifies the corporate machines because it absolutely cannot be bought, manufactured, or replicated by any algorithm or boardroom strategy. The intense, blinding hatred they continuously face is ultimately just a pathetic, hollow, and completely desperate reaction to a level of genuine, unconditional love that the traditional entertainment industry has never, ever seen before and will likely never see again. Every single time a malicious critic attempts to tear the group down, every time a xenophobic media outlet disrespectfully dismisses their massive achievements, and every time the notoriously rigged Western award shows blatantly snub their undeniable artistry, the global ARMY only grows significantly stronger, completely transforming their furious, fiercely protective anger into massive, record-breaking streaming numbers, massive, completely sold-out international stadium tours, and an unbreakable, historically unprecedented wall of purple light that completely shields the 7 members from the toxic, venomous hatred of the outside world. Sir Elton John's beautiful, highly publicized embrace of the group was a deeply poetic, profoundly symbolic moment that perfectly encapsulated this entire mind-blowing journey. It was the ultimate, undisputed king of Western pop, beautifully recognizing the new, undisputed kings of the modern global era, definitively proving that true, universally resonant artistry will absolutely always overcome the bitter, deeply racist and xenophobic gatekeeping of the old guard. When you look out into the massive, breathtakingly beautiful, endless ocean of glowing purple lights at a BTS stadium concert, you are not just looking at a simple fandom, you are witnessing a massive, fiercely loyal, and completely indestructible global family that was forged in the absolute darkest fires of relentless industry hatred, massive prejudice, and suffocating pressure, yet miraculously chose to fiercely love, aggressively protect, and beautifully heal each other anyway. This is the absolute, undisputed, ultimate truth, the phenomenal, earth-shattering core of their entire existence, and the incredibly profound, undeniably brilliant #1 reason why BTS will forever remain the most passionately hated, yet fiercely, completely, and unconditionally loved musical group in the entire history of the world.